what I actually find interesting is that Nigeria and Kenya both last year did more than $1 billion in deals, and Egypt close to that, and
Yeah.
South Africa in fourth
Oh,
place at 550 million.
yeah.
So we're lagging a bit when it comes to investments in South Africa specifically,
Mm.
which is interesting considering the amount of opportunity there is. And I think that the people driving the Startup Act has a lot to do with that. They
Mm.
see this, and they see the areas in which we have gaps, and they're trying to get the politicians to take note and take action.
All right, Renier, welcome back to Business Gambit. Good to have you back. How are you doing?
Yeah, thanks, Bobby. We made it. It's episode 2.5 or 3, technically 2.
Yeah, do we include the tests? No, it's good to do this. I think we can start building up some nice momentum. And I think in order to build up some of that momentum, I thought let's stop talking AI, because I think that had been in both of our previous things, and I think slowly but surely people stop talking about AI and Chat GPT. So I thought we could start talking a bit more about the landscape that we see ourselves in, especially in South Africa. And I know that we've spoken about load shedding, we've spoken about Minister of Electricity, just kind of looking at the political landscape that we're faced with here in this country. And I think, we've got an interesting election coming up in 2024. And like we were talking about before recording, is that in South Africa, we've got a country that is very much affected by politics. We're not a developed country like the States or in Europe where, a political leader will make a decision and it doesn't affect everyone as impactfully as we have here in South Africa. So we do need to pay attention, and there's a lot going on. And I think just to set the scene, I mean, there's a lot of conversation around the ANC losing that majority in the next election in 2024, which is set for May, I think it is, next year. And so, yeah, we're going to have potentially a coalition government. And yeah, if we look at the track record of what coalitions have done in the municipalities, should we be scared?
Yeah, I mean, the track records of up in the metros up north have been, horrible. Like, I mean, it's impossible to think that anybody can get anyone done if you're only in office for, maximum a year, maybe a year and a half.
Exactly.
And these politicians, their job is to keep the executive accountable. And, when they're busy fighting each other and trying to score seats on the municipal or the mayoral committee, there's not a lot of work getting done. So, and the latest development in that space in the city of Joburg is just absolutely bizarre. I mean, a party that got 16,000 votes in a city of millions of people is currently the mayor. I mean, it's bizarre to think how that played out in that way. And it kind of feels like people are getting a bit petty. They if I don't get my way as a minority party, I'm going to throw my toys out and vote against you, and then get someone else in that wants to bow to my will.
Yeah.
So very interesting times. I think, we're heading for coalition government, on a municipal and national level, maybe next year. And the inevitable thing is, it looks like the DA and the ANC might have to start forming coalitions to get anything done.
Yeah.
Because, these coalitions of the smaller parties ain't working. And I can't see the DA trusting the EFF going forward, and I can't see the ANC wanting to work with the EFF.
Yeah.
Which basically leaves one option left for something, and that would be quite ironic because for all of these years the DA has been hell-bent on bad-mouthing the ANC, and now it looks like the only way for him to move forward is to actually go into coalition.
The devil I think is the best way to look at it. And I think exactly what you just said, like there's a mayor of Johannesburg that got 0 point something percent or 1% of the vote of the city is now mayor. And, funny enough, the DA have actually said, I mean, call it how you want. And we're going to be as neutral as we can be on this show. We're not going to pick sides. But if you just look at what the DA said about choosing smaller parties and the subsequent things that have happened from that. I mean, here you have one person from a coalition of 8 decides to step away, and it breaks that whole coalition down. You're never going to get anything done. Like you just said, you're going to get no sort of momentum and actually solving the problem. And I think for me, coming from a product and tech space, and I think you might appreciate this, is that for me, when I look at the word coalition and I look at what's happening in Joburg, Tshwane, Ngqabecha, is the fact that there's a difference between coalition and collaboration. When we build stuff, when we build products, when businesses are built, it's about collaborating. It's about making sure we have a common goal and collaborate on that together. Whereas if I look at the word coalition and I look at it's just about getting power to go together. That's it. You're not collaborating. As soon as you don't agree with something, you want to back out, and the coalition is broken.
Yeah. It's never going to work.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
and ultimately people on the ground are paying the prices. I mean, if you look at the state of certain municipalities up there, like the service delivery has always struggled, but now it's even worse than it ever was. And something which I think is like a sleeping giant is the debt of all these municipalities. Like all of them are indebted,
No one's talking about it.
far beyond being a going concern, and yet they've got all this political infighting happening. I mean, I've got major issues that they have to solve. There's no time to play around on who's going to be the mayor. Soon there won't be any money to pay any of the mayors. So there's much bigger issues at play. So I think come next year, it's not municipal elections. It's obviously provincial and national government elections. But that will really set the tone for future municipal elections. So how will a province be governed in a coalition, and in fact it's not a foregone conclusion that the DA would retain the Western Cape. I mean, there's been a lot of indications showing growth and support for other parties in the Western Cape, specifically the Freedom Front. In by-elections, you can see there's a lot of votes for the Freedom Front, which could mean even the Western Cape is run on a coalition, which would be a first for the DA in many years. I mean, they've had the luxury of having been able to run the province for several years, but it's a real thing that they might have to run it in a coalition, which could change a lot of things. It could also up the accountability. It's good to have that level of accountability, but it also could introduce some chaos, which could flood over into business, into all of our jobs, all of our lives.
Yeah. Look, there's still a year to go, right? And we're on a week where the finance minister is going to give his speech. I think there is a cabinet reshuffle. We need to find out who this minister of electricity is going to be. So the ANC government has literally 12 months to kind of figure themselves out, try and figure out how
to get the power back on.
Get the power back on. Yeah, we're sitting here in stage 6 again, and I mean it's dreadful. And you've got these international. This is another thing. This whole state of disaster that came out of the president's speech the other day. This isn't something that we're just talking to ourselves here on this podcast. This is making international news. I saw a thing on Al Jazeera about it. I mean, we had the CNN guy in the country not too long ago, who was also, it was the top of the conversation. So the international eyes are on us and watching us, how we are navigating in these doldrums, really. I mean, there's not another way to talk about it. And it's a real problem at hand. We need to start working together.
Yeah. But look, if we speak about budget speech, I think everybody's eyes are on Cyril's promise of a tax rebate for going off grid or installing solar. And I think that's one of the big things, like what is going to come out there. Now, the challenge that government has is, the tax base is quite small. On the one hand, you don't want to take away anything from that which you can collect, right? So giving kind of any kind of tax rebate to anybody that is paying tax is already a bit of a stretch. But on the other hand, if you can't keep the lights on, those people might immigrate anyway or end up losing their jobs, which means you lose the tax anyway. So they're walking a very fine line here.
Very fine.
But I do hope that there's some good news for those that want to go the solar route.
They want to go what?
The solar route. Get some solar power on their rooftops.
Yeah, no, but it's great.
So that's the one I'm looking out for. And then obviously the big hits are always the sin taxes. What's going to happen with the price of alcohol and cigarettes?
Yeah, exactly.
But other than that, it would be really interesting to see what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about immigration, there's also this semigration conversation, and I think we can bring that back a bit later, just in terms of what the dynamic is happening in South Africa with it. But just to touch on the sort of more macro South African landscape, I mean, there's this conversation around South Africa getting grey listed. This week, the conference is happening and they'll decide. And for those people that may be not aware, the grey listing is kind of a framework that is set out by like a Paris organization that kind of look at how money gets brought in and out of the country. And it kind of looks at money laundering as one of its main kind of things that it looks at, and anti-terrorism and things like that. And the way they've looked at South Africa, and we can talk about should we even be paying attention to this or not? But the point is, that at the moment we've had it. I mean, there's been corruption and there's been no one that's been put to book about it. You know, we've got the Guptas that are sitting in Dubai and we haven't heard about any of their things in a while. So people are laundering money in South Africa, and this is what this grey listing is looking at. So it's going to make very difficult to receive foreign direct investment because of it, because people are going to say, but hold on, are they just going to launder this money?
So look, I mean, this is a serious matter, right? And, you know, as a country, we should sort it out, because I cannot help but think, but, you know, if people are allowed to do these kind of things, you know, then there's a high chance of a lot of criminals being active here, doing other kinds of things, which I don't want to be close to.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the first thing. I think as a country, it should be important for us to sort this out.
Yeah.
But secondly, I think it's just important to note that most of these things are typically priced in. So I remember when they said we're going to be downgraded to junk status. Remember that fear that was built up over years. And when it happened, nothing happened. Right. And we're still junk status, but still, you know, everything, life still continues. So I think to a large degree, a lot of stuff will go in on the way it has been, and it has actually been priced in. But there are some factors that will impact it. I read up recently on Pakistan that was on that grey list as well for some time. And they actually recently got elevated off the list, having put some measures in place. But then there was opinion saying that things were actually worse after they got back out of the grey listing.
No way.
Like, you know, it's not necessarily something that helps. So there's still a lot of debate around. It's quite a relatively new thing, so still a lot of debate around it. But, you know, inevitably, it's not something that a list that we want to be on, and it's not it's not another article on international news that we want to feature on. So, unfortunately, with the electricity challenges and all the other things, it's hard to think that they're gonna, you know, get this done in time and, you know, get everything sorted. Which means we might go on that list for some time. And then make a comeback the same way Pakistan did. So luckily, the good news is we can get back off it if we've put everything in place.
Yeah, so Mauritius is another example. They were on it and they took 2 years and they came off it, and they seem to be on a trajectory back to sort of stability and carrying on. So it's not doom and gloom completely. I think it's maybe a bit easier to get off a grey listing than it is to get out of a junk status. But there's kind of all these headwinds in South Africa's face that is just not kind of helping. And obviously, the whole point of our kind of the podcast that we have is like, what is the impact on business at the end of the day when all of this is happening? And when we look at kind of, I want to now bring back the semigration conversation, because in recent years, it's been going for a while, but Cape Town and Western Cape, obviously with the governance that it's had, it's had a lot of people come down to the Cape, and we've had the sense of a Silicon Cape, so our equivalent of a Silicon Valley up in the US, where we've had a lot of these tech startups and a healthy hub of tech digital startups that are happening out here. So I just wanted to get your view again on kind of what that semigration is doing, what's happening to the tech status, the tech world, and obviously then these headwinds that we've just kind of spoken about.
Yeah, well, in terms of semigration, I read an article the other day, which was quite interesting. It was the amount of building plans that are getting approved per province, right? So in Cape Town or the Western Cape, I think the increase year on year was about 20%, where elsewhere in the country it was pretty much negative or like 1 or 2%. So this is substantially more construction activity when it comes to building houses happening in the Western Cape than all the other places, which is already an indication that, you know, if more houses are getting built, there's a bigger demand, and you know, more people are moving in. And subjectively, if you speak to people in Cape Town, they would say like they meet people every week moving here from different parts of the country. I did read another article which is quite interesting. They said there's actually more people moving to Joburg and Pretoria than there are people moving from Joburg and Pretoria to Cape Town. And the reason being, people are moving out of smaller municipalities that are not functioning. You know, the surrounding small ones, and, you know, in Northwest and Limpopo and Mpumalanga, they don't have the money necessarily, or, you know, the means. They might be older people to move to a Cape Town. So they're actually moving into Joburg and Pretoria. So we got people moving out of rural, we got people moving to Cape Town. So it's all happening. And but it does create an interesting setup in Cape Town, right? Because now you're getting people from all over coming here, people that have very strong opinions about how the rest of the country is getting run. And then you have this Cape Independence Party pushing an agenda to say, let's separate from South Africa, which is a very interesting idea. You know, for many, we never thought it would be possible. But, you know, it looks like they're figuring out from a legal standpoint how that is possible. and pushing hard for a referendum, which is putting a lot of political parties in the Western Cape in a difficult position, right? If you don't support it, you might lose a lot of support from people that are pro that. But if you do support it, what are you communicating on a national stage? That
Exactly.
you don't want
Where's
to be
the
part of South
patriotism?
Africa.
Where's the South African heart? When you're kind of saying we want to break
Yes.
away. But I think when
So
you hear the stories of what's happening around the country, you kind of, you want to just like pay attention and understand what are they trying to achieve.
yeah, but look, from a rugby perspective, it makes sense because the Stormers is just as good as any other international team, so they might as well split away and
So clearly the
become their
show's
own
been taped
international
in the
team.
Western Cape.
So, but that is an entirely different conversation. But yeah, I mean, it does bring. What does it bring? So it brings a lot of people that work in corporate, still have jobs in Joburg, working remotely, flying in ever so often, that are now based here. So they're decision makers in big business, right? And decision makers in big business in Cape Town have social lives, and they hang out at braais, and they meet other parents at school things, and they meet other startups doing cool things based in Cape Town. They founders, and typically that's how opportunity happens. So we can speak about, one thing that's for sure in business, everything happens through relationship. Like you meet someone at school, your kid's school, and you can do business together. Like it just works that way.
Yeah.
So it is very interesting to see all of these people, coming to Cape Town, and being in proximity with each other, and also then having really strong universities, University of Western Cape, Stellenbosch, and UCT. Really strong computer science departments, both UCT and Stellenbosch, probably some of the best on the continent, and pushing out people building really cool businesses. So it's I think there was a big drive 10-15 years ago to get Silicon Cape going. I don't think it really took off to the extent that people thought it would. I think the timing's different now. I think there's an opportunity, and specifically the Startup Act, they're pushing hard for a remote work visa to make it easier for foreign talent to spend time and work for startups in South Africa. And I think if that were to come off, it could be very interesting, attracting some of the best tech talent in the Northern Hemisphere has to offer to come and live in sunny Cape Town.
Well, that's it. I think there's a whole conversation there just around kind of that. Like, so you talk about the Cape Independence Party, and you talk about kind of Silicon Cape and the Startup Act and stuff like that. And I think why someone would look into this independence kind of stuff is if you think about changing a tax law and what it could have, the effect that it could have, changing your immigration laws, or allowing people to come into the country that now come with skills that can create business and create jobs. I mean, you start thinking about, okay, well, maybe if we didn't have so much red tape surrounding everything we're trying to do, we'd be able to thrive a little bit more. And I think that's kind of the message that people are like looking at when it comes from a business perspective.
Well, Bobby, but the thing is, I mean, the whole governance system is so old, right? And I think this is not a uniquely South African problem. It's a global problem. I mean, a lot of what we're doing today in the systems and structures were inherited from the Romans. I mean, we've got technology now, we've got the internet, we've got blockchain, we've got all kinds of things. But it's kind of very similar to the schooling system. It's like, how do you actually change this? Because this thing is ongoing, right? It's running. Like, how do you stop and say, no, we're going to do education with an entire new philosophy? Because that's exactly what we need with government. We need to go, government needs an entirely new philosophy. Like, there's this whole thing of proportional representation, which results in people going to parliament if they're part of a political party instead of they come from a constituency, from a pool of people that are backing an individual. It just eliminates all accountability. Like, I mean, that's also something that's probably something that needs to be looked at. This is something which Musi Maimon is pushing quite hard for. That instead of voting for a party, you vote for an individual. And if that individual is not, helping you, then fire that individual and vote for someone else. But at the moment, they're hiding behind party lines, right? So if someone's not doing their job, they just swap him out, put him elsewhere, and put another guy in there, and then he does his job, and everybody seems to be happy again. So the system needs an overhaul, and I don't know if it's possible to overhaul the political system without switching everything off and taking a time out and switching it back on. So if you do a new country, right, if you split away like Cape Independence, and by the way, I'm not an advocate for Cape Independence. I think, I'd love to see South Africa resolve its issues. But if you were to split away, you start fresh, right? So you can have a brand new set of rules. You can figure out how a new government can look. You can design it substantially leaner, than what we're running at the moment. I mean, got so many political officials in government,
Mm.
and they're expensive. I don't know if people know, but a member of parliament gets more than R1 million a year.
Yeah.
Provincial
Exactly.
legislature is almost the same, and we've got we're talking about thousands of people in through all the provinces and all the national government, and then also municipal level. Obviously, not that much money, but there's a lot of councillors. So if you add all of this up, it becomes quite a hectic bill to pay all of these politicians.
Yeah, but that's an interesting thing now, actually. If just thinking about our first point of today's conversation was looking at what 2024 would look like. If, as some of the polls are saying, and they say we shouldn't really pay attention to the polls, some of them I also struggle to believe that the ANC is at 37% and the DA is at 27%, that and the EFF are still at 10. The maths doesn't make sense to me, even logically. Like, I don't think that those numbers represent what's really happening, and we'll have to see. But nonetheless, let's say that, ANC get below 50%, they get 40 odd percent, whatever it is. At the end of the day, every time they've tried to change the constitution or they're trying to do something in parliament, I mean, the ANC just all vote, 4-party lines, and it's just like whatever. As soon as you start diluting those votes, it's going to be interesting to see. Like we want to dive into the Startup Act now, for example. But it'll be interesting to see when you've got a diluted kind of parliament that's not sort of so strictly party lined, what kind of laws and legislation we could maybe pass through quicker and actually see some change.
What I would love to see is, if you have a president that's not aligned to a political party necessarily, or not to a political party that has a majority, the president might be inclined to appoint ministers that are not necessarily political ministers, but ministers that are actually competent in a specific area that they're working in, right?
That'd be great.
So if you, and I mean, no disrespect to any of our ministers, but I think for some of them it's really hard to carry the portfolios that they're doing. I mean, I would argue that, Minister of Police should be someone that's been in the police force for 50 years and they know exactly how it works. Or, the Minister of Transportation should be someone that's, in the elder years, having worked in that industry for several years. And I think that's one of the problems we have with the public enterprises. Eskom, get an engineer in there. Like, hopefully the Minister of Electricity is someone that's been in electricity generation for 30 plus years, because people like that understand how these things work, and they understand the intricacies and the complexities that go around making sure everything functions well. So I'm excited about that part. So if we get a president that's voted in based on an agreement that's not part of a majority party, we could see some interesting ministerial appointments, which I'm excited for, which I think will help us get some of the stuff back on track.
Yeah. And the thing is, at the end of the day, why are we talking about this? Why is today's episode around all of this kind of landscape? And it's because for the last while now, there's been this massive move towards an African sort of investment destination. A lot of people are plowing money into Africa. And hey, guess what? We're Africa. We're at the bottom here. We've got a very sophisticated, ecosystem, economic system. It's mature. It's diverse. We should be at the forefront. We just spoke a little bit about Silicon Cape. We should be saying, hey, listen, we're ready. We've got this talent. We've got the people. We've got the resources. We've got the understanding of what the local market is like. I think there was lots of conversations about understanding how, cell phones are used, how people use their data, just as a basic concept of understanding the local market. So there's this opportunity for us to be there and say, cool, well, if you guys, because if we look at these, all these stats that's coming through, everywhere else in the world, investments are going down, but in South Africa or in Africa, it's going up. So there's this massive trend coming, and there's an opportunity there for us if we can just sort of show that we know what we're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I saw it's, Africa Arena just released the African State of Tech report. And, in that, it's quite interesting to see, deals everywhere are kind of, like you say, going down. But in Africa, it's slowly ticking upwards, right?
Exactly.
And the amount of deals. What I actually find interesting is that Nigeria and Kenya both last year did more than $1 billion in deals, and Egypt close to that. And South Africa in fourth place at 550 million. So we're lagging a bit when it comes to investments in South Africa specifically. Which is interesting considering the amount of opportunity there is. And, I think that the people driving the Startup Act has a lot to do with that. They see this, and they see the the areas in which we have gaps, and they're trying to, get the politicians to take note and take action.
Well, this is it. Another thing that we spoke of offline was kind of all the red tape around hiring and firing people. The labor market in South Africa is so strict, so tough to kind of get going. You need to be very sure of the person that you hire, because if you do, you're going to have to be stuck with them. And the Startup Act, I think, is talking to that as well. You mentioned, right?
Yeah, and this really is probably one of the things that makes America's economy so amazing. And look, it's not an easy thing to do. It's built on a foundation of an education system. It's also a lot different than ours.
This is
but in America, you can hire and fire, right? And the concept is, if you don't bring value, you're going to get fired.
Yeah.
So a lot of people go, I need to bring value every single second, or I can get fired, right? And that does two things. Like, one, it ups the value that people bring to the workplace, but two, it creates a sense of calm for a founder to go, I can hire the people I think I need. If it's not a fit, I'm not going to have to pay a penalty of how many months worth of salary. It's easier for me. And typically they do offer severance in cases where it was, in certain cases, but it's not a, it's not a thing that now you have to be dragged to the CCMA and it's this long case.
Stuff can get dragged out for months.
You know what? The CCMA has its place, right? Mining companies that employ 15,000 people that need to go underground every day, and those kind of things. There's definitely a place for those kind of cases. But in the knowledge workspace, I think we'd be much better off to raise the bar and go, we expect a certain kind of delivery, certain kind of value being added. And if that value isn't met, then there's a way in how that transition works out of that business. So the Startup Act recommends or the Startup Act movement actually recommends to government that the UIF can cater in terms of a package for that person, to cover some of their costs until they find something else, which could make sense if the UIF is able to do that. And that's really interesting. And I think some of the other things that I found really interesting, is the campaigning for the exchange control, which has always been an issue. The issue of getting money in and out in South Africa has always been a challenge. But there's also good rationale as to why they are managing these things. So you need to have a lot of confidence in your currency, which I think at the moment, for whatever reasons, they don't have that confidence. So, they don't want to destabilize the rand, which is bad for all of us. So, they want to keep that intact, but they want to have different, rulings when it comes to founders of startups and investment in startups to cater for those kind of situations. And then also tax incentives for people that are investing in early stage startups. And all of this makes sense, right? We're transitioning from a resource economy, from mining, farming, all of those things, into a knowledge-based economy. We want to be exporting software. We want to sell software in other parts of the world. You can just look at America and Israel. I mean, Israel, they've launched so many billion-dollar companies out of Israel, such a small nation. And there's a book actually called The Startup Nation that speaks about this. And it's phenomenal, just the amount of startups that have come out of Israel that are billion-dollar companies. And they've realized this a long time ago. We need to export knowledge. We need to sell knowledge outside of South Africa and bring some of that money back to reinvest in the economy. Which is obviously, it's way easier to sell software to someone on the other side of the world and sell a boatload of grain or coal or something of that sort.
Bars of gold.
Yes. Not that practical.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's interesting, everything you've just said. And again, you just spoke about knowledge, and you mentioned the strong universities that we have here. So we're churning out some good talent, some good knowledge-based people. Unfortunately, because the economic environment is very tight, it's very thin, people kind of do start sniffing overseas. And obviously, since the whole remote work became a thing, like, people were able to sniff overseas. And so we need to put a stop to that and say, stay here, work with us, build up these amazing opportunities. I mean, I don't want to talk about it again, but I mean, in terms of the government, and like, if you think of Home Affairs, the traffic department, just the systems that they're using could do an upgrade. And we've got the people that are willing to do it. I think if you told a group of engineers, software engineers, listen, we need to revamp the Home Affairs system, they'll do it in a heartbeat, because it will save a lot of pain in this country.
Exactly. But it's actually, there's something else to it, Bobby, which I think is really important. It's we need to be a country that people desire to come to start and build businesses, right?
100%.
And that's probably America's biggest success, right? I mean, how did Elon Musk end up in America?
Exactly.
It was just the environment that's conducive for him to build something that's always been his dream of building.
Yeah.
And he's not the only one. There are several South Africans that are making it big in the tech space. And it's not about making money. It's not the point. The point is, being able to build a business that has a meaningful impact. So the question really becomes like, well, what do we need to build an environment that actually attracts not only South Africans to come back? That's the first step. But the biggest step is, how do we get the smartest brains out of Europe to go, you know what, I'd rather build a business in South Africa than anywhere else.
Look at that beautiful sunshine you have. Let's go and work there instead of here.
We've got everything covered in terms of environment and lifestyle and cost of living. We just need to, make it easy for these people to do business.
Yeah, it's interesting. And there's a stat that I couldn't not look at this report that you shared, that only 4% of CEOs are female, which is quite an interesting thing, especially when we've been trying to push that narrative for a long time. And it's another thing that we should be trying to push, right?
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting thing, right? And I think the topic can typically get very heated because there's no clarity of direction in terms of leadership. Well, what is the objective here? Like, what are we doing? I think firstly we need to figure out like what is a target. Like, and I mean, a lot of people go, yeah, but it must be 50-50. But 50-50 isn't always, what it comes down to if you ask every single person what they desire to be in their lives, right? And a good example of that is if you look at teachers in schools, like most of them are female, right? We're not trying to do 50-50 in schools. We're trying to get some balance, but there's no drive to do 50-50. It just happens to be that more females are interested in those kind of jobs. Now, okay, you can always say that, but it's the only jobs that are available for females. I'm not talking about those cases. I'm actually talking about people pursuing their passions in life, right? So, it's the same with when you look at construction companies. They'll always have more males than females. And, if you look at if you look at the military, there are females doing great service in the military and the police, but it naturally just tends to be something that men do more. Okay, so the first thing is we need to figure out what is that percentage. I'm not saying it's less than 50, maybe it should be 60, but that is the first thing that needs to be figured out. Like, what is a good number? Okay, I think the second step, which I found quite interesting, is in trying to help and solve the problem, people are creating these female-only accelerators, right? And whilst I think the heart behind it is good, the only thing they're doing is all the other accelerators have 0 females. Because they're pulling all the founders into one, and now we've got no diversity in all the other incubators and accelerators. So you look at a great accelerator that maybe traditionally has been 95 or 98% male. Now all of a sudden they go to 100% male, but it's still a good program. It gives you good access to things, good exposure, great things. But now, the female-only accelerator has pulled all the females that side. So the chances of them actually getting into a good accelerator, I'm not saying the female-only ones are bad. I'm saying chances of them being part of the good one is now smaller because they pulled into that one. So, I think the way to think about it really is there is value in diversity, right? No matter how you look at it. And we've seen it in South Africa. I mean, just look at the Springboks. That's a beautiful example of how we've used the best of what we have as a nation to be the best in the world. And it's the same in business, right? There's value in that. And, I think we are moving forward in this. We're seeing more VCs that have LPs that are female. We're seeing more investments in female companies. And we're seeing some amazing female founders like Zulay from Locum Base. If you just have a conversation with her for 5 minutes, I mean, she's incredible and she's doing amazing things with that company. And there's quite a few others as well. So it's a matter of time, and I think it is shifting. And also you have to think from a ground up, like girls need to seriously consider entrepreneurship as a viable career option. And I think they are, but I just think, it can probably be accelerated by communicating about it more. So I'd love to see more female CEOs. I'd love to see more investment in female-led companies. There's something different when a female leads a company. Like it has a different, there's a different vibe to it. There's more. I think there's sometimes more calm and less chaos. Men tend to break everything and then try and build it back up, where women seem to take it more step by step and methodical.
Yeah.
So, and I'm generalizing.
Yeah. No, but I
But
think
yeah, would love to see more.
yeah, I agree with you. I think you make a very good point there. It's just that diversity, and it's being able to attack things from a different angle, as we kind of go very logically, and they go more practical, for example, whatever it is. Just having that different mindset, that different emotion about going into different problem solvings and how to approach it. Yeah, I can name a few. There's Gabby Immelman that's doing phenomenal with Mindjoy. There's Aisha Pandor that's been doing sweeps out for many years. So there's a lot out there, but I think one of the first things you said when you brought up the topic is, know your numbers, understand what they want, what you want to do. And I think that that's a great way to look at it. If you want to change the Startup Act, okay, so what is the outcome that we want to achieve by doing it, and kind of put those numbers out there, set those goals for ourselves. And the government should be doing the same thing, like be numbers driven and understand what we're trying to achieve so we can all get there together.
Government should be product people, Bobby. That's the way.
Oh man, amen. Amen. You don't have to tell me twice. I totally agree with that.
Get the matrix down and iterate.
Yeah, 100%.
But something else that was quite interesting in that report as well is, and this is the Africarena State of African Tech report, 37% of investments were fintech investments. So, it's amazing that the fintech investment is still on the rise. Like, we still need more fintechs.
Listen, sitting in product, the amount of times I've heard, let's bank the unbanked. I mean, there's still a lot of people that need to be banked. So I'm not surprised by that, by the way. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities there. I've had a few people on my podcast that I've spoken to that are in the fintech space. And I think there's still a lot of room there for it. A lot of innovation available, I think, considering, again, going back to how we understand the market here in Africa. I think that there's a real opportunity. There's the Revios of the world that are like on the ground, changing the way payment structures work in South Africa, how remittance works. I think there's lots of things. We talk about it in the crypto space as well. So to see that stat, I'm not surprised. I think that
well, I also think, Bobby, the other thing is, if you capture a market in that space, there's a substantial amount of money to be made. I mean, if you compare the likes of Shoprite, which is an enormous company with thousands of employees, their profit margin is minuscule compared to a first round. So I'm sure, there's a lot of work that goes into both of those kind of businesses. If you have the option, maybe build a fintech and not a retailer.
Yeah, exactly. That's an interesting take. And then on that note, I think we'll end it there. So thank you very much, everyone, for watching. Hit that subscribe button. And Renier, thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
Thanks, Bobby.